folks, and welcome back to Sub2 Investor. You know that on this channel, I'm dedicated to bringing you the best content on how to establish massive passive income with creative real estate investing. It's with that in view that I'm going to bring you an update as to what I've been doing these past 9 to 12 months. I have some major updates and I've really leveled up my business. I'm really excited to share this with you. Stay tuned. I am just a guy. I am just a real estate investor in the Midwest trying to build a large portfolio of cash flowing properties. You get to watch my content, my deal breakdowns, my analyses, how I structure deals. You really get to learn from, what my deals look like from the inside out. You get to learn from my mistakes. You get to learn from my journey, the things I tried that worked, that didn't work, that kind of worked, but I wouldn't do them again. And I am basically building a business. And if I were to summarize these past 12 months, what I'd say is that I am going from being a guy who buys houses to a guy who owns a business that buys houses. I stole that from Brandon Turner, the guy that he learned that from, told him something very similar, that there's like two kinds of real estate investors, those who buy houses and those who build businesses that buy houses. And when I heard that from Brandon, whom I love, I really got into real estate investing via the Bigger Pockets podcast with Brandon as the host. It just deeply resonated with me with where I was at. And I've really been trying to make a hard turn away from being a solopreneur to really thinking about my business as a business, something that is predictable, which will predictably yield results day after day, year after year. And so I'm going to talk about all of that in this video, and there's going to be lots and lots of good stuff in here. I guarantee it. I'll probably end up spinning off several other episodes from the things I talk about because there's so much here that I can't divulge everything in one video. But let me reel it back in. Yeah, I've been releasing videos on deal breakdowns, what that Sub2 deal looked like, how it's performing today. I haven't even caught up to all of our deals that we hold. I'm planning to do more of those deal breakdowns. But what's been happening in this past year is a real shift in how do I create this predictable business model where the pipeline of deals is stable and reliable, where the funding, if it's gap funding, I know we're using Sub2 for our funding, most of it, but there's still that gap funding in between, which needs to be predictable. And then on the exit, selling with contract for deed, wraps, lease options, where are the most predictable places to sell, like the best neighborhoods, the places where I know I can get the highest down payment, the highest monthly payment, the best and most quality type of buyer. All of those questions swirling around in my head. So I'm going to kind of take you on this journey that may not seem like it makes a whole lot of sense, but probably by the end of the video it will. The very first thing that I want to talk about is going to Texas. I went to Texas, not physically, but virtually, to go do some deals in Texas. Now, why would I do that? I live in a Midwest city that's a stable housing market. When the country is experiencing ups and downs, generally in the Midwest, where I live in St. Louis, is generally pretty stable. And it's still, I guess, a seller's market, kind of. It's trending maybe more towards a buyer's market, but it's not there yet. I'd say it's probably still a seller's market. Whereas today in September 2025, that is not the case. It is definitely a buyer's market in those places that saw a large housing boom during COVID and more of those coastal markets as well. So I am in a totally different market than that. So why would I go down to Texas? And why did I go down to Texas right on the cusp of when Texas was turning from a seller's market to a buyer's market, which was quite unfortunate. I have to say that was probably the worst timing. Although I think buying a deal there now would probably be even worse timing than when we bought it about a year ago. So let me tell you why I went there. So we bought two deals that were subject to. They were subject to deals, good interest rates, good loans, decent houses, and we wrapped them. We did wraparound mortgages on them and sold them on a wrap. Now, I also wholesaled another deal down in Dallas and learned a lot from that one. It's kind of a different story. Wish I probably would have held on to that one and tried to wrap that one rather than the San Antonio one. But let's not get into all of that for the moment. Why did I go to Texas? Well, a lot of people who watch these videos might live in Texas, and maybe you live in Florida or in the South somewhere. As you know, right now the market has softened a lot. But the reason I went to Texas was because a quarter of all seller financing deals, and I guess we would probably assume that most wraps and wraparound mortgages happen in the state of Texas. So when we're talking about selling on seller financing, right, this amazing strategy that very few people pursue, very few people build a business on it, but it produces this reliable passive income, most of it happens in Texas. So what that means is that there are professionals, there are attorneys, title offices, transaction coordinating companies, all this kind of thing, note servicing companies, RMLOs, right? Mortgage loan originators, who all reside and do most of their business in the state of Texas. So me being a guy who has done lease options and contract for deeds, I'm really curious about this whole wraparound thing because I had done one, but I hadn't done any more than that prior to my time in Texas. And the one that I did, I was really trying to model off of a coach that I was in his program to learn this, but I really wanted to get hands-on with doing wraparounds in Texas because I knew that in the process of actually doing deals there where this is a very standard business model for some people, that I would just learn a lot. I did learn a ton of stuff. I'm not going to be able to share it all right now. I learned things about, let's just give you an example about what a wraparound deed of trust should look like. Because when you sell in a contract for deed, this is a land contract. This is a single document that acts like a promissory note and a deed of trust, but it's totally different. It's a totally different vehicle to convey title to an end buyer. Whereas on a wraparound, it is you're giving the deed over to your end buyer, and so your security instrument needs to include all of this language to address the fact that you have underlying debt on the property, and it's going to give you protections, it's going to give the buyer protections. And I'm not going to go do a bunch of wraps unless I can see for myself how they're done professionally by somebody else. And so we got to work with an attorney who really, really, really understands this stuff and does it on the daily. And we got to see his paper and how he papered these transactions so that I could come back to my local market and replicate the model in accordance with Missouri state laws. That was one reason I went to Texas. And in the process of doing these deals in Texas, I also learned a lot of other things. I'll probably release a video just dedicated to this topic, but I ran into multiple investors who do wraparounds as their business model. Just like I might do contract for deeds or somebody else out there might do contract for deeds, it really is like the same basic model. You're just using a wrap instead of a contract for deed. You're selling it on seller financing, but I ran into multiple investors who, as a course of their business model, they do a lot of wraps. And so I got to talk to them. I got to ask them questions about what that was like, what problems they confronted, all sorts of things I learned. I also learned that most people who are successful doing these wraps, even in Texas, are sticking to one local market. So like if they lived in Dallas, they in general wouldn't go do deals in Austin or San Antonio or Houston or somewhere. Generally, they knew their own local market, their own metropolitan statistical area very well and just focused in that area doing these kinds of deals, which was a telltale sign to me that, Texas might be a nice place to go snag some really good Sub2 deals right now because it is a buyer's market. You can go find some juicy Sub2 deals. You are going to have a hard time selling those, a lot harder than it's going to be selling them in my market, for example. However, even if I wanted to go pursue more deals in Texas, what I learned is that people who own big portfolios of notes and cash flowing seller finance deals, they own most of those properties in one local market. market. So if it's like San Antonio, the guy only did wraps in San Antonio. If it was Houston, the gal only did wraps in Houston and knew that market very, very well. So that's kind of a word to the wise that, even if you are deciding to go virtual in your business and maybe you need to go virtual, it's probably wise to try and stick to one market if you can. Pick a good one and stick to that one. That is the proven road of success. Now, you could go be a maverick and go do something that very few other people can go do. But for me, I want replicability. I want a proven, solid model that if I do it, I will get the results. And what I'm seeing from an empirical evidence perspective, you could call it anecdotal. You run into person after person after person who does this and does it successfully. And what are the common denominators? Well, one of the common denominators is that they stick in their local market. So for me, I learned that, you know what? My local market is good. I'm probably just going to do deals here for the foreseeable future. And I have a few in Texas. Great. I learned a lot, but I'm not going to go be doing deals in Houston, San Antonio, Odessa, Dallas. I'm not going to go do all that. St. Louis is a good enough market. There's enough deals here, which I'm going to come back to, because are there enough sub-2 deals here to make this business model really work in a market like St. Louis, other markets that are similar like Cincinnati or Louisville or Columbus or Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Fayetteville. I don't know. There's a lot of cities like St. Louis, similar size, that you can get sub-2 deals, but can you get enough sub-2 deals to really establish that portfolio you're looking to establish solely with creative financing? I want to come back to that later in this video. That's a great question. So going to Texas, we learned how to do wraps. I got an amazing education, bumped into a lot of experts, and I also learned what it's like to sell a property in a buyer's market. We absolutely got hammered and had a heck of a time trying to sell these houses because buyers were wary. They could sense that the market was changing and home values have been steadily declining. I really experienced what it's like to sell in a buyer's market. I don't like it. I wouldn't choose to do it if I didn't have to do it. So what I gathered from all the paperwork and all that process, I've incorporated into my system. I have all that stuff now. And you know how I am with my paperwork. If you've ever signed up for my program and have access to documents, if you send me an email like, hey, Hans, this document is old or it's from this, do you have any updated versions? Usually I'm going to update those on my website, but you can always just reach out to me if you've purchased any of my paperwork packages or coaching products. I will just send you the latest version of anything that I have in my files, because I just like to share that with any of my customers. And I'm pretty encyclopedic, not in terms of my memory. I don't have a great memory, but in terms of my Google Drive folders, I'm pretty organized, and I like to take the best of that expert and that attorney and that person and incorporate it into my paperwork so that I have as impeccable of paperwork as I possibly can. Wraparound deals. I know how to do them now, and I have the confidence to do them and have done them in my local market ever since having done them in Texas. I did a video prior to this on contract for deeds versus wraps and which one is better, the pros and the cons. Go watch that video if you're curious about what is a wraparound. It'll all make sense to you. Now, the second thing that I did in these past 9 to 12 months was really establish a paradigm for doing JV deals with money partners. In general, we borrow from private money lenders. That's generally what we do in our business. However, I wanted to establish a model for doing JV deals that really made sense and that was appealing not just to me, but also to the JV money partner. So I spent a lot of time crafting, and using artificial intelligence to do this, by the way, crafting a joint venture agreement so that partners of mine who have money and want to fund deals, but they want to be an owner in the deal, we could do those deals together and have a really good agreement. And paperwork, which lays out all of the contingencies. If this happens, who's responsible? And if there's so many different scenarios and contingencies within a deal, the way that a deal could go, if you have to take a property back, and if you're forced to sell it on the market, if you're negative equity all of a sudden, or if you do have equity and you do want to sell it on the market, who has voting rights, right? Do you give your money partner voting rights, or do you have the voting rights as the operator? When are you obligated as the operator to bring money to a deal, if ever, in a JV partner agreement? And so there's lots of different, so many different, it's like mind-boggling all the different scenarios that could arise. And so leveraging artificial intelligence to craft a JV agreement with an equity partner was a big thing, because some of those deals that we did were done with equity partners, okay? People who wanted to stay in the deal and be owners of the property and then owners of the note once we wrapped it and created the note with our end buyer. There are a lot of advantages to using an equity partner and doing a JV type deal, but the main advantage to using an equity partner as opposed to going out and borrowing private money from a private money lender is mitigation of your debt liability. I heard this from another podcast I was listening to, and it really was a light bulb moment for me. And when you start to run the numbers on the deal evaluator, I love my deal evaluator because you can run a deal as an equity partner deal or as a private money lending, and you'll be able to look at that final profit breakdown tab, and you'll be able to see that when you do equity partnership deals, you are giving away more of the deal typically. Typically, you're giving away a lot bigger piece of the pie if the deal goes perfectly, right? But here's the thing, if the deal does not go perfectly, then you have a lot more debt liability, not only on the underlying first mortgage of the deal that you took Sub2, but also with your private money lender who's in second position, that now you owe them as well every single month until you as the operator rectify the situation, stabilize the deal, and get it operational again. So let me summarize. The main reason to use an equity partner in a creative finance deal is to mitigate your debt liability. In the event the deal goes south, or in the event of a down market, you would much rather have an equity partner to be the deep pockets that steps in and covers the cost of things until you get that deal up and running. That's it. Otherwise, you're taking a negative on your ledger, on your cash flow ledger. What should have been a positive cash flow number that month all of a sudden becomes negative, and it's going to affect your bottom line greatly if you're just using private money. Now, all that is to say, I learned how to do JV deals pretty stinking good, and I've gotten a good picture of what it all entails. And one thing I will say about doing JV deals, and when I say JV deals, I mean equity partnership deals with not with other wholesalers, but with like private money lenders who would rather be an owner than lend, right? I have learned that they are a big pain in the butt in terms of the accounting, okay? I will say that. That is a major, major downside to doing equity partnership deals, because the accounting is so taxing and difficult, not easy to understand, and if you're not a detail-oriented person, you will get suffocated by it. Moving on. The other thing I've been focusing on is establishing my business model. I know that sounds strange because it seems like I kind of have it all put together, but I did not have it all put together. In fact, I'm trying to think when this was. A little bit over a year ago, I met with a good friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur and owns several different businesses. And I just sat down and I said, hey man, I feel like I'm a little bit stagnant. There's been some shift in my business operations recently, and I'm just looking for some direction. Like, what advice do you have for me? And one thing he asked me was if I had written down and drawn out how my business works from beginning to end, like how the model actually works. And I had something kind of like that, but it wasn't really as specific as he was asking about. And what he was talking about was what Gino Wickman calls an accountability chart, which really, it's kind of like an org chart, an organizational chart some of you might be familiar with. What my friend encouraged me to do was sit down and write out exactly how your business functions. Like, what are the departments essentially in your business? Who's the visionary? Who's the integrator, right? Or the operator, sometimes it's called. And then what are the big departments in your business? Who's in charge of them? And what are the major functions of the business? I can't summarize all that here. I'll do another video, but if you read the book Traction, but he also recommended Get a Grip as a better version of Traction, which is more the narrative version. I mean, you could just look up a summary and you'll see what I'm talking about if you look up accountability chart. But I did this. I took this very seriously. So I sat down and I drew out, I spent, like a week really thinking about this and reading the book and trying to get a handle on what Gino Wickman was talking about. And I realized that within my business, I am the chief visionary. I have the ideas. I have sort of the big relationships. I like to, keep a big picture perspective on what's happening. And I can be what they call an integrator. It's like the visionary and the integrator are two sides of the same coin. The integrator is just more the hands-on daily operations kind of manager. But chiefly, I'm like a visionary. I'm a little bit less of an integrator. It helped me to understand I need to turn off my visionary mind sometimes and then just kind of float down here into the integrator role and execute as the integrator. And then I realized that my business has 5 different departments. And this is how I think about my business now. I realize that my business has an acquisitions marketing department, which is its own department. It's its own job. Really, there needs to be a head of marketing for acquisitions to purchase a good deal. Marketing is a big piece of it. I decided not to put my marketing acquisition department together with my acquisition sales department because they're really 2 distinct tasks and they both are very important and take a lot of time and energy in their own right. I'm going to lay it out for you. So I have a visionary and integrator. Those are both at the top. And then I have a acquisitions marketing department, an acquisitions sales department. So that's the second department, the person that pre-qualifies the leads, manages the leads, closes the deal, manages the transaction. And then I have a disposition department, which is both marketing and sales, because the disposition in my business, lease option, contract for deeds, wraparound mortgages, it's a lot, but the marketing and the sales aren't so much that they need to be distinct in their own departments. It can be its own single department. One person can really be in charge of both of those things. And then my 4th department over here is operations. So operations goes from everything from like rehabbing a property, general contracting, over to title company, attorneys, a note servicing company, RMLO, the stuff that makes the product, the stuff that makes my product. And my product is homeownership opportunities to people who are neglected by the traditional lending system. So the homeownership opportunities, you have to have a house that's livable, right? So you have to have some contractors to go do stuff, but you have to have good paperwork, right? You have to have an attorney to draft stuff, a title company to close stuff at, a note servicer to service the notes, because that's all part of the product that we're offering. So that's operations in the 4th department. And then in the 5th department is the finance. Okay, that's the bookkeeping. That's the JV ledgers, which are super annoying. And going back to equity partnership deals and the onerous responsibilities of the bookkeeping side of things, I have to keep JV ledgers for every JV deal, standard bookkeeping for my business, and then like consulting with tax strategists, end of year tax filing, all that kind of stuff, and cash flow ledger. Cash flow ledgers and payment collections all sort of go in this finance department. And when I sat down, I finally figured out, whoa, that's really how my business operates and needs to operate. And if everything is working, we're doing deals. Happily off to the races, buying properties, selling them, and making money. Which all leads me to the 4th big thing I've been up to in these past 12 months, and that is bringing on a full-time virtual assistant who really is going to be in charge of several of these departments. I've learned how to hire somebody, which is its own learning curve, because I've had virtual assistants in the past and some who I still use for certain things. They've all been part-time and they've all been at hire basis, like a contractor basis. So this was the first time that I decided I'm going to hire somebody full-time who's going to work exclusively for me. They're going to be in the Philippines, yes, but I need to figure out how to make a really good hire. That was its own big learning curve. Once I found the person, I hired them, constructed the terms that made sense. And ever since then, I've just been super busy creating standard operating procedures and training videos on Loom, detailing every single task in my business because I know how my business works. I understand the different departments and what needs to happen, of course. But as I go do those things on the next deal, I'm recording very detailed videos of me doing them and then giving my virtual assistant the responsibility of them doing those things. This is the path of growth. This is the path of moving from a guy who buys houses over to a guy who owns a business that buys houses. And I do think that it is a metamorphosis. It's a transition from the caterpillar state to the butterfly state. You either go down this path that I'm going down right now to establish a business, or you're going to hang out and stay in this solopreneurial zone and just be doing a handful of deals a year if you stay in that solopreneurial mindset. That's what I've been up to these past 12 months. I'm really excited to share with you more about all of those things, especially kind of the last two things, which I feel are the most important and significant for anybody out there wanting to establish a business, building passive income using seller financing and creative financing. I think I have like 82 Loom videos. 82 Loom videos. That's not even half of the videos that I want to create on how to do every single aspect of the business. But once all of those SOPs, standard operating procedures, are established and all the training videos are established, well, then I'm ready to make a second hire. I'm thinking about this a lot. All I will say is that if you are a member of my coaching program, those videos, they're going to become available to you. If you are curious about anything in my business, like how do you market to expireds, or how do you do on MLS low equity marketing, or how do you talk to agents, how do you follow up with your leads, how do you market your deals, how do you go find buyers, I'm establishing training videos for my team how to do all of these things. And so if you join my program, go to my website, sub2investor.com, you will have access. If there's anything you're curious about, I'd be happy to share with you those training videos. I'm an open book. If you're in my program, I'd love to share with you anything you have questions about, how I do this or that. I'll go find the training video if I've created one, and I'll just share with you the link so that you can watch it. I think that's going to be an amazing value because it's going to show you how somebody who's on the ground doing this is actually doing it. It's not just talk. It's not just some influencer trying to get a lot of views or really just build a big coaching program. I'm not trying to build a big coaching program. My coaching program is for people who want to do what I'm doing, and they just want to learn from a guy who's 1 or 2 steps ahead of them. Hopefully I can get 3 or 4 steps ahead. I hope that you can catch up, and so that I'm always just 1 or 2 steps ahead. I am advancing in my business. I'm taking strides, and I wanted to share with you those things that I've been up to, and I will be getting more videos out to you guys soon. Let me know what you want me to talk about in the next video. If you like the content, please like and subscribe. Hans@sub2investor.com if you want to email me, or check out my website for my coaching products, my online course, my paperwork products, my deal evaluator, sub2investor.com. Until next time, stay creative. Peace.